you ever heard of microbiome magic? Or how gut and immune resistance can support our health? Or have you heard the term canaries in a coal mine? You're about to. Welcome to the Everyday Ancestral Podcast. I am your host, James Barry. My next guest is Dr. Elisa Song. She is a Stanford, NYU, and UCSF trained integrative pediatrician, a pediatric functional medicine expert, and a mom of 2 thriving kids. In this episode, she shares how science, holistic wisdom, and real-life parenting can transform the future for our kids. I learned so much, and I can't wait to hear from you what you get out of this episode. Please enjoy Dr. Elisa Song. So I want to first start, though, what got you into medicine? Was this something you wanted to be when you were a little girl, or was there some health episode that happened that kind of propelled you into it?
Yeah, I, knock on wood, never had any health episode for me or my family that propelled me into medicine. I think especially that propelled me into integrative medicine and functional medicine, because I think that's the story for a lot of practitioners who've done the conventional route, and then all of a sudden they can't find answers for either themselves, their kids, their parents, or whomever. That wasn't my story, which I'm so grateful for. I think as a kid, I just loved taking care of things and people. I loved babysitting, and I actually had this vision that I was going to be a veterinarian. and I had this vision of living in this ginormous barn and having one of every single animal in the world and taking care of them. And when I realized that probably wasn't going to happen, I thought, well, what else could I do that would be similar, where I would feel like I'm really taking care of and nurturing these little creatures? And so here I am. I ended up as a pediatrician.
Well, what's so incredible, though, about how you are a pediatrician is that it seems like you're really finding the balance between Western medicine and, that functional or integrative medicine, the more holistic medicine. What got you on that path? Because I imagine you went down the normal trajectory, right? Initially?
Yeah. Well, when I was at Stanford as an undergrad, and I wasn't, at that point, was not going to go into medicine because my mom was an OBGYN, and I just saw how hard she worked. She delivered all of her own babies. Her office was attached to our house, and she made time every night to stop her office hours and have family dinners with us, which in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that was amazing that she did that. But that wasn't the lifestyle that I really wanted. So I kind of discounted medicine, and I still want to work with kids, and I was going to be a children's public advocate and go to law school and fight for children's civil rights. And I had this big vision of being in DC and making a huge difference for kids in that way. But then I actually my junior year, after I'd taken the LSATs, I came across this flyer that was just in one of those telephone poles, and I looked at it, and it said, Annual Conference of the American Holistic Medical Association. And this was back in the late 80s. And I thought, what is holistic medicine? I'd never heard that phrase before, right? And back then it was also called alternative medicine. So whatever got me as a junior to drive down to the Santa Clara Convention Center and attend this conference, I think it was just the path I was meant to take, because my mind was totally blown. I heard from folks who were just starting to get known, like Andrew Weil, Deepak Chopra, Joan Borisenko. And I remember I came home and I called my mom and I said, you know what? I think I want to become a naturopathic doctor. And it was kind of quiet for a little bit. And she said, what is that? And that was kind of the response I got from again, late 80s. I actually called Bastille and got an application, but none of my friends or family had heard of naturopathy. And so they never discouraged me, but they also never really were kind of fully like, yeah, that's the right way to go. And the refrain I got was, maybe go to medical school first, and then you can kind of sort it out. And so that's what I did. And all through medical school, though, I kind of paved little ways to get a little integrative, holistic medicine in my path. And as a medical student, I, actually at NYU, started the holistic medical student chapter in our medical school, and in residency, I created a little elective for myself in rheumatology, immunology, on integrative pediatrics, and was able to shadow a whole bunch of practitioners in San Francisco, like chiropractors and osteopaths and acupuncturists, and see that there was a different way that we could really do things, not an alternative way, not a completely separate way, but really try to marry the best of all worlds, knowing that each modality has its benefits, but also its limitations. And now we're kind of up against really seeing all of the limitations in conventional pediatrics, which can be life saving for acute conditions, but for the chronic conditions that are really taking over our children's physical, immune, and mental health, conventional pediatrics doesn't have the answers, and we need to look at root cause, functional medicine, and integrative approaches.
I want to go into what chronic illnesses we're seeing in kids these days. But before we do, I just want to touch base on something you brought up, which is that a lot of your colleagues or a lot of the people you were in medical school didn't really understand or kind of didn't look, view medicine in the way you were. Why do you think there's such, maybe resistance is the wrong word because that's a judgment, but there is kind of a resistance to looking at medicine in a different way, as you said. It doesn't have to be exclusively different, but just including these other modalities. It just seems like, I'm just curious, why do you think that is in the medical world? Is it just simply that they don't have the awareness because it's not in the programs? Or do you think it's a literal resistance of like, no, this is wrong and we're right?
I think it's a little bit of both, and depending on the person. And what I'm really, one of the things as I was starting out, and I started my practice in 2004 as an integrated pediatric practice, and I certainly got a lot of, pushback, negative comments, definitely was not supported by the larger, pediatric population as a whole. And yet there were people who, pediatric colleagues who came to me saying, wow, I really admire what you're doing, and, thinking outside of the box. And interestingly, it was a lot of the much older pediatricians. We'd kind of seen the evolution of pediatrics and seeing, okay, that humbleness that comes with experience, that we don't have all the answers, right? And it was really a lot of times the younger, maybe fresh out of residency, or even the medical students and residents who, were not so much opposed, but not as open-minded to the fact that there could be another way, and to accept that we don't know everything yet, and we never will. And we always need to maintain that open mind of, scientific inquiry and questioning, are we still doing the right thing? And I'm really just so I think honored and blessed to know a growing number of pediatric practitioners, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, pediatricians, MDs, DOs, who are starting to think outside the box and have the courage to say, I'm really grateful for my conventional training. It has served me well, and it continues to serve my patients well at a certain level. And now we need to dive deeper. And so it's growing. It's going to take some time, and we're not quite there yet. But I've had, with my book that came out last year, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, I never, ever dreamed that this would be possible. But I've had universities like UCLA and UC San Diego, and a nurse practitioner school in Minnesota reach out and say that they're having their pediatric trainees read my book, because it is so it's grounded in science, yet very, very practical, and meant for initially for parents, but really for practitioners to open their eyes and see that there is another way that we can address, as we mentioned, this rising crisis of chronic childhood disease that our kids are facing.
Absolutely. And one last question before we go there, which is, if you could change the medical system, where, the education piece of it, where people are learning at that learning stage, and ideally at that curiosity stage that you mentioned, what are 3 holistic practices that you would want immediately incorporated into those programs that you have found to be just hands down like the most effective in your practice?
Um, and I don't know that I would call this even holistic, but nutrition, right? I mean,
Right.
just understanding the foundations of, food as medicine and food as information. This shouldn't be, holistic or alternative. And now, I mean, in the conventional world, there is lip service paid to diet and lifestyle, and yet, when we don't understand as physicians the underlying science and the biochemistry and the why of why this is probably the most important prescription that you could write, we don't necessarily have that conviction and that belief in the power of food to then impart that to our patients. Because changing diet, let's face it, it's one of the hardest things in the world to do. It's so much easier to pop a pill for many kids and adults, right? But when we're asking for a paradigm shift in how we're eating and how we're thinking about food and how we're thinking about what we put into our bodies, we as practitioners have to 100% believe and live that. Otherwise, we're just kind of saying, don't smoke while we're taking a smoking break, at lunchtime, right? And so I would say, not just nutrition surface level, but understanding the biochemistry, understanding, the biochemical reasons why food is such powerful information for your genes and your microbiome and your immune system and your brain.
And right now in medical school, it's true that that's really not covered at all, or if it is, it's very surface level, like maybe 2 weeks or something.
Very surface level, and then when you look at some of the studies, looking at there was this one study that just came out, showing there was I can't remember, it was a probiotic supplement I think that was used, and there were better outcomes, and this was for adults. But what they also found was that families or adults who took the probiotic supplement were also much more likely to have a healthier diet and lifestyle. And so, could we attribute those outcomes just to the probiotic? Now, okay, yes, I get that. And the outcomes were really remarkable that health patterns were much better in those adults who had healthier diet and lifestyle. So why not tease that out? I mean, time and again, we're seeing the power of the Mediterranean diet, or, adding more fiber to your diet, getting healthy lean proteins, healthy fats in your diet. And so, that if we don't, as practitioners, impart that to parents and to children, we're just going to be on this continued trajectory of, nobody's getting well. And we're going to be scrambling as adults to, once our health has fallen apart, trying to biohack our way back to however we felt in our 20s, right? And so I don't want that to be the future for our children.
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, our kids are the canaries in the coal mine. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I was really startled about, as I was doing research for my book and really trying to get down what is the state of kids' health today. One of the studies I found was looking at autoimmune levels in different age groups. And there's a very non-specific blood marker called an ANA, or anti-nuclear antibody. It doesn't mean that you have an autoimmune disease, but it means that your immune system is shifting into autoimmunity. And that is absolutely the canary in the coal mine. And what they found was every single age group since the 80s, when they started looking at this, has had a rapidly increased rate of positive ANA levels. Now, what they found was that the age group that had the quickest rise from the 80s to the 90s, there was double the rate. And then from the 90s to the early 2000s, triple the rate from baseline of positive ANAs were our teenagers, 12 to 18 years of age.
Oh, wow.
Right? These are adolescents. And nobody is really checking ANA levels. Now, I started checking ANA levels because I want to know, and it can be frightening to see on your 13-year-old that they have this positive ANA, but I want to reframe that and really have parents and kids think about the fact that positive ANA is something we can absolutely reverse with diet and lifestyle and supplements and all the things. And so we can actually prevent your child from tipping over into an autoimmune disease. And so, that is why I check the labs now, because I want to see which teenagers have this simmering autoimmunity that may not present until they're in their 20s or 30s, but why wait until that point?
Why do you think we're seeing that rise? Is it just from increased testing, or do you think it's the environmental toxins and processed foods? Like, what is your thought on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's really bottom line that our kids and frankly our us as adults, our gut microbiomes have changed, and our gut microbiome is really the heart of 70 to 80% of our immune system, which lies in our gut, and the crosstalk between our gut microbiome and the immune system in our gut is essential for maintaining what's called immune tolerance, that we can tolerate living in this world that's foreign, right, without attacking it, and also in tolerating ourselves. And with autoimmune conditions, our immune system starts to not tolerate ourselves and literally starts attacking different parts of our bodies, whether it's our thyroid in Hashimoto's or whether it's our joints in rheumatoid arthritis. And so we know that there's a particular category of beneficial bacteria in our gut called Bifidobacteria that has been gradually declining over the decades in the last century. And in fact, babies, when they're born, should have almost 80 to 100% of their gut microbiota composed of Bifidobacteria. There is a really what I would consider a landmark study that was published earlier this year that found they tested newborns, their gut microbiomes, and found that almost all of them had no Bifidobacteria levels,
None.
right? None, or like very, very low. And again, it should be 80 to 100%. And when we look back, there was a Scottish pathologist 100 years ago that looked at baby poops, and there was actually even formula back then, and compared baby poops of breastfed babies and formula-fed babies. The breastfed babies of 100 years ago had 100% Bifidobacteria. Fast forward now, the breastfed babies of today, their gut microbiomes look much more like the gut microbiomes of the formula-fed babies 100 years ago,
Oh
right?
my goodness.
So even nursing doesn't guarantee that your baby's going to have the right microbiome to inform and educate their immune system from the start. And that has to do with environmental toxins, ultra-processed foods, psychological stress, which can harm our microbiome as much as any toxin that we're put in, the overuse and inappropriate use of antibiotics, whether in our food supply or actual antibiotics that are prescribed and for children, in some studies, up to 70% of antibiotics were inappropriately prescribed because most kids, when they get sick, they have viruses and antibiotics don't do anything. And so we're at this time now where this is what, we in our modern world have done to our microbiomes. And it's time to then now wake up and recognize that and figure out how to optimize our microbiome so that we as kids and adults can have the healthiest gut immune system connections and gut brain connections.
When you talk about resilience, is that what you're ultimately talking about? Is like resilience comes from that, that strong and resilient immune system? Is that the equation for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, resilience, we can see resilience, many parents when we talk about resilience, we're thinking more about mental health resilience, that grit, right?
Yeah.
The blessing of a skinned knee, how do you kind of get back up? But that trickles to every cell in our body. and affects our immune system, affects our gut microbiome. In fact, we can now see measures of gut microbiome resilience. How resilient is your gut microbiome to bouncing back after a round of antibiotics or after, a vacation where you just ate, tons of junk all week long, right? And so, or travel time zones. I mean, all of those can affect our microbiome. And so it's not that we want to live in a bubble. We want to reduce the factors that disrupt our gut microbiome, but we also want to build that resilience so that when the inevitable, birthday party with neon blue frosted cupcakes, like make it into your kid's diet, you're not freaking out and you can trust, okay, their microbiome took a little hit just now, gonna bounce back, and I have the tools to do that.
Yeah. So before I go to the tools question, which that is inevitably coming, do you think we're stressing out too much about some of these things? Like, because as you mentioned earlier, stress is a huge contributor to that lower microbiome. And we are getting inundated with information around food that we historically never had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so do you think we're getting too granular about it?
That's I think exactly the word that is appropriate. Too granular. I think that we have we're at the point now. It's just information overload, and it's better than no information. And we understand so much more about the impact of what we put in and on our bodies, and how that affects our immune system and our brains and our microbiomes. And yet, what we're not stepping back enough and doing is realizing that way of thinking granularly about how this vitamin affects this cell, and I have these labs saying I need to take 50 different supplements. Well, our body is not isolated cells, isolated organ systems. When we step back and look at our bodies and our brains and our immune systems as an interconnected web, and we can move the dial on, a couple of things, and we can really look more holistically at, well, how do we live on the whole? How do we help our brains as a whole, really be safe and comfortable and empowered in this world? That's when we can move into real health. And what I worry about, and this is one of the things that's happened in the functional medicine space. I love functional medicine. It is one of the foundations of how I practice and how I teach. And yet, for many functional medicine practitioners, especially those who are starting, they haven't yet moved out of the conventional model of looking at this test result and assigning this medicine for that. Now we've shifted to, let's look at this test result and assign a supplement to that. And that is where we come out, with, pages of supplement lists and families or children who believe that they can't be well without supplements,
Oh gosh,
right?
this is such a good point.
Right. And then who look, I've had kids who have had autoimmune illnesses, PANS, rheumatoid arthritis. These are not, light health conditions. And I completely get that. And yet, when we're to a point where kids are in remission, doing great and thriving, and we have a lab result that shows maybe one or two lab values off, I have parents who, really are then just focused on correcting that lab instead of stepping back and looking at their child and saying, my child is doing great. Every single one of us, if we did lab work, we are going to find one or two or maybe more things that are off balance or not optimal. Do we want to work to optimize those? Yes, but we don't define our health by our labs. That is a part of the picture. And I really think stepping back and taking a bigger picture is what's eventually going to shift the paradigm of medicine. We haven't been doing that well in functional medicine, really. And even in the biohacking world, right? You see all of these gadgets and everything that we have to do, these supplement stacks and, these devices from dusk until dawn, or dawn until dusk, we should say, right? That you are literally trying to biohack every moment of the day. That's not the way to health either, because now you're not trusting your body to do anything. you're saying I need all of these external things to maintain and optimize my health. And so I think it's shifting. I think we're going to get there. I think that we're now in this age where, yes, functional medicine, devices, biohacking, it's kind of had its huge heyday. And now there are people stepping back and saying, what about a simpler way? What about, trusting again our body?
Yet, I was just in Target recently because my daughter was influenced by at her camp. Some of these kids had these supplements, and she was like, "Oh, I want to go get what they had," and they were all gummy supplements.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I went into Target, because we were like, "Look, we'll let you try this once, but you realize everything we do at home is already supporting all these things because we're very functional, clearly, and very." Really thinking through these things and trying to create that lifestyle that supports that resilience with nutrition and gut health. And I was shocked at how many gummies and how trending that is. And I was honestly very disgusted. I actually got angry because I was like, this is the candification of these supplements that you're talking, of this functional medicines. It's literally making it like candy, which it's really not. And I think that's the wrong message. And it's the illusion of health. It's making it sound like this is enough.
Yeah. Well, and I do, and that's with supplements in general. It started off with, Flintstones when we were kids, right? And those were delicious from my memory, right? I remember my parents saying, "Oh, you can only have two," or whatever it was, even though we wanted more and more.
You'd sneak
And
five, yeah.
Yeah. And when you look at the gummies, and I'll call out some names, right? There's Ollie, there's
Golly. There's Golly
yeah.
too.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many brands out there that are, and what is the other brand that is so Smarty Pants, right? Smarty Pants are probably the two most popular. Smarty Pants and Ollie have the gummies. And when you look at the serving, because I'll have parents come in and I've recommended maybe vitamin D, because they're deficient or insufficient, and maybe some magnesium because they're constipated or having headaches or having trouble sleeping. So then, they'll go out and buy the gummies. And when we line them up and look at the amount of added sugar in each serving, right? One serving of, vitamin D gummies, will have maybe a teaspoon, 5 grams of added sugar. Now they're having gummy omega fish, which are total junk because they don't have enough omega fatty acids in them. And they're having gummy vitamin C and gummy vitamin D, and they're having, gummy, magnesium, and then and a gummy multi. And then all of a sudden that's, 30 grams of added sugar right there.
Yep.
And when I
people are not
talk to them,
keeping, they're not thinking about the cumulative effect. That's exactly what made me so angry. And I even said that to my daughter. I was like, no one's taking just one of these a day. They're taking 8 to 10 of the different.
Mm-hmm. And some of them, and then you have to watch out for the zero sugar ones, because those can have sucralose and acetylsulfame potassium, which are artificial sugar substitutes, which in my mind is even worse. Now, kids should have no more than 25 grams of added sugar in a day. So already with their gummy sugar, they're kind of upping that. But then when we look at the acetylsulfame potassium and the sucralose, which is found in lots of zero sugar sports hydration drinks and protein bars and whatever, now my teenagers are looking at, we look at the labels and they understand which ingredients, even if the front of the package says, high protein, good energy, whatever it is, right? Sports recovery, they know to look and put back if it has artificial colors, if it has sucralose, if it has acetylsulfame potassium. I mean, this is where our kids now, they're going to be inundated. The supplement industry is not going to go away. And, I am committed to teaching kids and how to really be savvy supplement consumers, because at some point, and I do believe many kids will at least at certain times require supplements above and beyond food, because our food has become so depleted and because our immune and brain needs have gone so high, in our modern world. But they need to understand how to be savvy, because I mean, you can see now, I mean, the shelves and shelves and shelves at Whole Foods and Target and Walmart and whatever of lots of supplements that are, some are good and some are total junk. So even when, just as we're being more savvy about reading food labels, we have to be very savvy about reading supplement labels too.
It's so true. And I think though, then that goes to the question of like, well, how do we discern these things? Because I mean, and really it's not just food labels. It's like, how do you discern what this influencer is saying versus that influencer? How do you discern this study versus that other study? Because as you know, I'm sure you know about this, is like those 80 studies that all came out saying, oh, drinking soda pop a day is not bad for you. You just need to exercise more or whatever. That those were all debunked later, realizing that they were all paid for by Coca-Cola or one of those
Yeah.
companies, right? So how do we know what to trust and what are we looking for?
That is really the ultimate question, isn't it? How do we become savvy research readers, especially if we're not scientists or physicians? And kids are so savvy nowadays. And our kids who are kind of bordering, Gen Z and then Gen Alpha kids, our Gen Alpha kids are growing up in an AI world where they are going to be able to chat GPT anything. And I have kids coming in with ideas for supplement stacks, for, optimizing their sports performance or, helping them with, lose weight or whatever it is. And they're researching and they want the right evidence. And yet they don't understand how to look for the right evidence. And that comes with looking at the source. I mean, you have to try to figure out what the source of the funding for the research was. And if it was, it doesn't mean that just because it was sponsored by a supplement company or a food company that it is automatically a bad study. But you need to have an even more critical lens when you read the results and you read the interpretation. Right. And then also, making sure that they're reading multiple papers, not just the ones that confirm what they want to hear. I had this one kiddo who came in with this list of research papers trying to prove to me that MSG was totally safe and fine. And I said, well, let's take a look at your sources. And now let's try to find some other sources that might refute this and then really try to, compare those head to head. So it's, we have to also meet kids where they're at too. And kids nowadays, it's not enough to say, oh, because I told you it's healthy or not. Like they want to know. But then we need to help them understand how to be savvy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into the question of what kind of, well, let's equate symptom to how you would advise healing with some of these. Now, obviously, you're giving just, very surface advice because clearly if something serious is going on, they should really be testing and working with, someone that like yourself. But what are kind of the top 3 symptoms you're seeing in kids these days? And what are, potential things that parents can immediately incorporate to support those symptoms from with some healing?
I'd say the most common issues that I'm seeing in kids as young children, it's eczema. I mean, 1 in 3 kids to 1 in 5 kids nowadays has eczema. And, the babies I'm seeing, most of them are not coming in with the buttery, soft skin that we think of, as smooth baby skin. And then, of course, as kids get older, they have the bumps on their arms, the keratosis pilaris, and then the acne. I mean, those are all signs that there's something going on the inside that's not balanced, that's coming out on the skin. And then we have the brain symptoms. Attention and focus and behavioral symptoms show up really early on, and anxiety. And anxiety is something that, when your kids are little and they're in preschool and they're starting elementary school, for most parents, it's all about their immune health. So that is part of it. If your kids are getting sick all the time, getting ear infections all the time, that also is a sign, hey, let's look to see what's going on inside that we can balance. How do we, optimize their immune health and their gut health? But then, towards the end of elementary, middle school, and certainly by high school, the immune health takes a lower level of concern, and it becomes a mental health and anxiety, and this lack of stress resilience. And what we're seeing in our teenagers is really this crisis of mental health that has existed for decades, but now is really coming to light. I think, thankfully, this new generation of kids, there's not as much of a mental health stigma. And so there's an openness about talking about, well, I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I'm neurodiverse. And yet we're not meeting them with the tools that they need to then manage their anxieties or their ADHD or, whatever behavioral, cognitive concerns that they have. And so I really want to help kids reframe that. And I think about this because my daughter right now, she's 15 and a half. And, teenage girls since the pandemic, it's been noted that, up to 1 in 3 teenage girls has seriously thought of suicide.
I hear cutting is increased as well, right?
Cutting is increasing, and I look for that in my kids. And when I see marks, I'll ask them, "Oh, why did that happen? Why did you hurt yourself? What's going on here?" And I, with the parents not in the room, well, I'll ask them, "What's going on? What happened that you really felt like you needed to do this because this is not okay. Your brain should not feel this way." And so, and when we think about the gut-brain connection, that's why I always talk to kids and teenagers about what their gut microbiome does for them. And really, from the mental health standpoint, I want them to understand that their gut microbiome produces up to 80 to 90% of their serotonin, which a lot of high schoolers have heard of serotonin. It's our brain, quote, brain chemical that helps us feel calm and relaxed, manage stress, helps us sleep. But we can only have the optimal amount of serotonin in our bodies if we have the right gut microbes to make the serotonin for us. And I've had remarkable stories of, in fact, I just spoke with this one kiddo yesterday, and she came to me at 10, and she's almost 11 now. So at 10 years of age, with ADHD, OCD, ODD, I mean, you name it. I mean, she had all of these initials, diagnoses, and she had tried many different medications. All of them either caused worse behaviors or caused her to stop eating, losing weight. I mean, too many side effects. None of them really helped her behavioral and cognitive symptoms. And so when the parents came to me, they were desperate because she had stopped really eating. She had narrowed down to like 3 different foods, and she had, she was, the whole family was walking on eggshells. They were, and I mean, the poor girl, I mean, she did not like how she was acting, but she couldn't control it. And the parents were almost afraid of interacting in the least bit because she would explode and become aggressive and throw things and become aggressive with her younger sister. And so you could tell they were just all, I mean, the vibration of their stress was so palpable. And so the first thing I did was just say, look, I'm not going to, give you any supplements or make you change your diet if you don't want to, but I'm going to educate you and tell you why I think that's important. And so we just laid that foundation, and the mom called that night and said, she heard you, and she actually was willing to have a little floret of broccoli on her plate, right?
Wow.
Without pushing, just, saying, look, you have the power here, right? And then I spoke with her about her microbiome, and she agreed to do a stool test. And when we looked through her stool test, she had these abnormal bacteria that we know can cause a lot of inflammation. She had something called lipopolysaccharide that these abnormal bacteria make that can cause a lot of immune and brain symptoms. And we worked on that with some supplements. And within less than a month, her mom called back and said, I can't believe that my daughter is willing to take her supplements every single day. She must be feeling better. And this is the first time we've seen her actually relax and smile in like months or years. And she said, I thank you so much. We finally feel like we're getting our daughter back.
Oh,
And that was in less than 1 month. And now it's been, I think it's been about 9 months since we've been working together. She's starting middle school, and things are just continuing to go up. And even yesterday, she said all the things that we're trying, they're helping. My daughter knows that they're helping. She was on the Zoom with me, and none of them has any side effects like the medications. And so they're just so hopeful that things can get even better and better. And I want parents and kids to understand that sometimes medications are necessary, and I've prescribed medications for anxiety and for ADHD. But if we don't look back at the foundations of the gut microbiome, food, how we're living, it's going to be an uphill battle. And so getting those foundations is key, and then we layer in medications if needed.
are there specific practices that would support that step towards optimal health that families listening or watching this podcast could just start right now without going to a doctor, without even testing, but just because this is the smart thing to do for everybody?
Yeah.
Are there a few
Yeah.
that you might impart?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is if you want to dive in more, I would read my book because I put everything in there that we're talking about today in a really practical, doable way for every family. That it has all the steps, and I call them the 5 things for microbiome magic. They're the 5 things they show you how to nourish your microbiome, what foods to really focus on, what foods to keep out, how we really breathe and engage our vagus nerve every day, how we move, hydrate, and sleep, all those things that, and I put them in a way, it's the way I actually speak with the kids in my practice and the teens in my practice. And so I've had teenagers read the book and, then want to implement some of the facets because they're reading it, right? And not because mom and dad are telling them. And in fact, what I'm loving is that a lot of my kids who have graduated off to college now, they're reading it and saying, "Oh, that's what you were talking about, Dr. Song." And now I'm trying to do this in my dorm and, trying to cook this way. So what are the things that we can focus on? If we're thinking about what foods to try to get in, we really want to focus on, I call them the 3 microbiome champions are fiber, fermented foods, and phytonutrients. Those are our microbiome needs plants. They feed on the plants in our diet. And so fiber is what our microbiota eats and use to ferment and create all of these other compounds for us, like the serotonin I just mentioned, or dopamine, which helps with attention and focus. Our microbiome, when they ferment these fibers, they actually make a lot of vitamins for us, like B vitamins and vitamin K. And so these are all what we call postbiotics that are really, rich in fermented foods. And that's, another thing, that's another microbiome champion, get your fermented foods in. There's lots of different creative ways to get fermented foods. We can move way beyond sauerkraut. I give an easy fermented blackberry lemonade recipe in the book that kids love. And we can ferment just about anything, right? You can ferment fruits and make popsicles and smoothies with them. And then, really nutritious gummies with grass-fed gelatin, and really whole foods, and then phytonutrients. So the color. Each color in a different fruit or vegetable or plant provides information for our microbiota to communicate and affect our epigenetics. So what does that mean? It means that even if anxiety or autoimmunity or heart disease runs in our family, or diabetes, like everyone on my dad's side is diabetes. Well, you can shape how your body will eventually interact, and your microbiome can shape how your genes express themselves, so that you don't have to be one of those, everyone in my family conditions. Right. And so, that's one place to start. If your kids are super picky, one of the places I start with is just letting kids know and parents know that really picky eating, narrow palate, sensory, not liking the different textures of the food often is related to not having enough zinc in your system. And zinc is highly correlated with animal protein intake. Now, you can get zinc from, pumpkin seeds, nut seeds and legumes, but it is highly correlated with animal protein intake. So making sure that you're getting high quality proteins in your diet, sustainably caught, low mercury seafood, really important because that also has the omega-3s, fatty acids for your immune system and your brain. And of course, we want to use pluck, organ meats, right? I mean, organ meats are so rich in iron and vitamin B12, which we need for methylation, and vitamin A for immune support, and has some zinc in it as well. And so there are ways that we can optimize the very, very common nutritional deficiencies that kids have with food. Now, there are also signs, like I mentioned, the picky eating, that can be a sign of low zinc, right?
Right.
So even if you don't have a opportunity to get blood testing done, we can. I know if your kids are really sensory, loud sounds bother them, tags on their shirts, maybe I'm going to try adding more zinc in their diet or trying a little bit of a zinc supplement, right? Or magnesium, another really common nutrient deficiency in kids. If your kids are constipated, get headaches, have trouble sleeping, have, really hard time managing their stress, have really bad period cramps if they're teenagers, that to me says, ooh, your body is screaming for magnesium. So let's get in those magnesium-rich foods, and maybe we'll try, a safe dose of magnesium if we can't check and test to see how much your body really needs. And I give those clues in my book on some clinical, physical signs that your child might have these nutrient deficiencies, even if you don't have a doctor near you that can do the testing.
These are such great tips. How do you deal with diets? I mean, a lot of these kids, particularly junior high to high school, they're probably coming in sometimes with like, well, this is how I'm going to eat, or they're kind of like already standing on that soapbox of like, this is the diet that I'm going to get, and it's possibly that diet that's causing that havoc. So, how do you even recommend parents navigate, all these dietary influences that they might be getting from social media or their peers or whatnot, and then yeah, I'll just leave it at that. How do you recommend that parents navigate dietary preferences?
So it starts with the education, right? I think that's really important. I mean, when kids come in, I mean, let's say, with horrible acne, right? That is I mean, many kids and teenagers, if they have really bad acne, they're a little more motivated to try some things. And I just let them know, look, your skin is a mirror of what's going on the inside. And if you have really bad acne, just now pay attention to when you have outbreaks, what could be some of the triggers. And I will list some of the common triggers. Of course, for girls, some of it can be their period hormonal, but for girls and boys, I talk to them about food triggers. It could be dairy is a very common culprit, and of course, sugar, right? And just notice, like when you go off, I mean, I have kids who come back from summer camps where they're eating, tons and tons of Kool-Aid and, desserts and whatever. I mean, ultra processed, not such great food. And they come back and their skin is a mess. And I just plant the seed. Do you think that could have been from the food you were eating? Right. And so you plant those questions, and then, I let them know, look, if this is something that you're really interested in working on, I would suggest a trial going off of dairy and mapping out. And here's how I might do it. Let's make it as easy as possible, and plan it out. Let's look at what is in your diet that has dairy, first of all. And now let's think about what we can swap instead. What are some of the replacements so that you're not stuck at Chipotle with your friends thinking, oh my God, what am I going to get? Right. And so mapping all of, like making it as easy as possible. I do the same thing with parents with younger kids. I map out exactly like, what does your week look like? Where do you, eat out? Where do you shop? Let's think about, what you're going to swap at the grocery store, what you're going to swap at restaurants to make it really easy. So for kids who are pushing back, I don't say they have to change anything at the moment. I just say, look, this is something that could help. Your eczema that you don't, you wear long sleeves so that nobody can see your elbows and you're scratching all the time, that could be gluten, right? And just kind of planting those seeds. And some kids will immediately after that kind of make note and go home and actually want to start trying and making those changes. Other kids, it takes several visits, but that's okay. I mean, these conditions didn't happen overnight. And we really want these dietary changes and optimization to be for a lifestyle. So I just let parents know if food is becoming a battle, just back off, right? Because you're not going to win that, especially when they're teenagers, right? And they're going off and buying their own food, right? And you have things available. You have cut up vegetables, chopped fruit available as a snack when they come home on the table. So they're not just reaching to the pantry and grabbing the bag of chips and the soda and the whatever. And you keep your pantry the way you would like it, right? So that, if you're buying potato chips, you're buying maybe the bolder ones with olive oil, and the siete cassava, tortilla chips, so that's what's in your pantry, not the fiery hot Cheetos or the Takis, right? So you're, as a parent, responsible for buying the groceries and choosing what's in your household and making it available to your kids. And then the kids are responsible for making the choices that they want to. But then you're educating them. So as their brain and their frontal cortex develops, they can start making those rational decisions for themselves.
If someone decides to try the elimination diet where they're pulling out either gluten or dairy or soy or something like that, just picking one, how long do you recommend they try that for? 2 weeks or a month?
2 weeks at a minimum.
2 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks. I mean, I let parents know and kids know that if we want to do a really, really good experiment, it has to be minimum 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, and it has to be 100%. So I'll walk them through it. Now, before I have kids do an elimination diet, I have them replace that food in their diet already, so that when it's like, D-Day on the calendar, this is when we're going to do the 100% elimination, they already have all the different pastas that they're going to eat, or, the tortillas that are appropriate, or whatever they love, like croutons, or, that they have the replacements at home and as part of their diet. And then once we decide to do the elimination trial, we do 100% for minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. And then after that, let's say take gluten, for instance, we will then take one day where we reintroduce gluten full force, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then we stop, and then we wait and watch. Brain symptoms, skin symptoms, gut symptoms, immune symptoms, sleep, mood, whatever it is, for the next 4 or 5 days. And if there's no reaction, then we can say, oh, okay, gluten's probably not a huge factor. Maybe we'll try the next one. Now, what I prefer to do is actually eliminate, because sometimes it's multiple foods, right? And so I prefer with gluten, usually I'm doing gluten and dairy at the same time. And then depending on what my level of suspicion is, like for some kids, eczema, I often find citrus can be a big culprit. So if they're eating a lot of citrus, I'll have them, try eliminating that. And for some kids, it might be eggs. So we just kind of go with what they're eating a lot of and what parents and kids suspect.
We only have a few more minutes, so I want to just give you some kind of like questions that are more quick fire. But what is one surprising daily habit that has had a profound modern health impact?
I would say the one simple thing that can profoundly change the trajectory of your health is learning how to engage your vagus nerve every day. And that, it's simple. If we just teach kids and adults how to do belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, when they're sitting on the way to school, or sitting at their desk before a test, or, whenever it is, we want to get our body and our brains out of fight or flight and just breathe with our belly, not with our shoulders, for maybe 10 slow, deep breaths. That slows your sympathetic nervous system down, engages your vagus nerve, and sets a whole chain reaction in motion that strengthens your immune system and your brain health and your gut microbiome. And so with that one thing that we can do anywhere, anytime, without looking strange or different, in the classroom or wherever, before a soccer game, if you're kind of, amped up, okay, just slow down, do 10 belly breaths. We're teaching our vagus nerve to kick in when it's supposed to, and we're teaching it to be able to kick in whenever we need it, like when we're sick with a virus, or when we're really stressed because of exams.
I love that. Yeah, so some deep breathing. Yeah, I find I have to support my older daughter with that a lot. Like just teaching her how to regulate her breath when she's up there, and it
Yeah.
works every time. But I have to really kind of come up to her, physical touch, and I have to breathe with her. But my hope is that by me doing this now for however the next 10 years or whatever I need to do, that she'll eventually do it on her own. That's my hope.
She will. And I love what you're saying, because as a parent, for any parents listening, this co-regulation piece is so important. And when we see our kids stressed or sick or anxious, it's so easy for us to kind of escalate too,
Or to
right? But
problem
if
solve, like, oh, well, we got to fix it,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. But if all you did was what you're doing, slowing yourself down, using your touch so that your temperature and your heart rate start to co-regulate, that helps kids to understand what that regulated state is. And with that kind of body-brain memory, it's going to be so much easier for her to access that when she's older on her own. So absolutely. And it starts with just practicing, because we have to know how to get into that state.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's so good. Screen time, social media, they're at some of our, parents, they're some of our top concerns
Yeah.
and our top battles, right? And I know your kids are in high school, so maybe it's starting to change for you because or maybe it's not, maybe it's increasing, but is there a ancestral rhythm or a physical resilience, that can help restore, or I should say, is there an ancestral rhythm or ritual that can help restore the mental and physical resilience in today's kids?
Yes, absolutely. Because, to be really just completely honest, there's not going to ever be a time where our kids don't have screens in their lives. I mean, these are the first generations where they are digital natives, where, screens and AI are a part of their everyday life. Now, that doesn't mean they have to have a screen, at every age. And, my children, they're 14, almost 14 and 15 and a half, and they do have smartphones. I would have gone back and not had their first phone be a smartphone, like if in retrospect. But it is what it is. They don't have social media yet. And I've told them honestly, I don't know when we will, allow them to have social media on their phone. It has to be a reciprocal, decision where they have to show that their brains are responsible enough to be able to shut off when needed, to not get, mesmerized and addicted to the doom scrolling, which honestly for adults is really hard, right? I mean, I find myself doom scrolling at night when I'm like, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, it's 45 minutes. I should have been asleep, right? And so, I want their brains to be more in control of that. And I let them know, I mean, teenage years is all about building independence, self-advocacy, being in control of your life. And screens are designed to take over your minds. And so we, just like ultra processed foods, right?
Yeah.
Those food additives and those sugars. So by allowing the screen or this ultra processed food to take over your brain and cause a craving and an addiction, you are then no longer in control. And so, that is very important. What's one thing that can counter that though? Because, there's no going back from phones. I mean, teenagers are going to have phones at some point. I mean, we need their brains to learn how to use them successfully. Again, this doesn't mean that they learn how to do that when they're 7 or 8, right? But having time every day where there's a screen-free zone, I am adamant that meal times need to be screen-free, whether that means you have a basket where everyone, including the parents, put the screens away. There's not even a temptation. If it's beeping, that can wait, right? I mean, there's rarely a time that there's such an urgency that you have to interrupt your meal, your family meal, to go answer the phone or reply to a text, right? So meal times, screen-free. I really try to enforce, and this is something that this year, as we start back at our new school year, a screen-free car zone, right? Because some of the best conversations you're ever going to have with your kids is going to be on the ride to school, right?
Absolutely.
Where you're not kind of in their face, eye to eye. They're in the back seat, and I mean, conversations just happen if they're not buried in their phones, right? And I also think really implementing, if you can do this daily, great, but at least weekly, a walk in nature where no one has phones. You're together. You're just, that being in nature will engage your vagus nerve. And then having the opportunity to not have your brain constantly looking at something will give your brain the opportunity to know what it looks like and feels like to be just free and calm.
Wow, this has been such a great conversation. I would love to just keep talking, but I want to respect your time. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that people check out your book. I think it's a phenomenal book. We passed it out to so many of our friends when it first came out. We bought a bunch of them and gave them as gifts.
Oh, thank you.
And but you're also working on a a pre and probiotic, right? So you are trying to provide a solution for supporting the microbiome. When can we expect that, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's a microbiome supplement. So it is a complete daily, all in one essentials for your kids and their microbiomes. And there are no probiotics in it. So it has all of the foundations to grow this ecosystem inside your child that then houses the most favorable microbiome possible. And the reason there's no probiotics in it, because this is a huge educational lift for a lot of people, is that our microbiome is composed of hundreds of trillions of microorganisms, and just sprinkling a few strains of probiotics may not be the right ones. We have such a unique microbiome. And so probiotics are designed to be supplemented. At least my belief is probiotics are meant to be supplemented for specific needs. So if your child has eczema, we're going to look for one that supports in the science healthier skin. If your child has anxiety, we're going to look in the science for the specific strains that support a healthy stress response, not just a random smattering of different probiotic strains. So what this supplement has, it's called Hello Biome. It has 30 different plants. Remember, plants and phytonutrients are so important for your microbiome. It's got a blend of 10 fermented berries. It has prebiotic fibers that are evidence-based for pediatric populations, and a complete multivitamin, multi-mineral mix. So it's basically everything your kids and their microbiomes need to sustain daily a healthy, optimal life. And that is called Hello Biome, and coming out in December.
Awesome.
If all goes well, December or January. It's coming right around the corner.
That's excellent. That's 2025, everyone, no matter when you listen to it. So hopefully it's either out already or it's coming. Well, thank you so much. And I love that you're focusing on, hey, because that's true when you ferment, dough. I mean, there's microbes in the air, right? So in a sense, you're basically saying, look, we already have these things. We just have to nurture them, really, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love
I
your
love that
point.
analogy.
I love your point as well early on, where you were really talking about like not just focusing on the illness, but focusing on the capability of the body to heal and to really focus on the child as a whole of what's possible in them, not what's wrong with them. And I think that if there's any message we can take from this, I really cannot stress that enough, because that came up for our own family this summer when my daughter went into the camp that she went to, feeling like she had something going on, and came out feeling empowered because the camp focused on the body's ability to heal without
Yeah.
anything else. And it focused on, there were no screens. It focused on like interaction, touch, like very ancestral human principles. And so she had literally an entire 3 weeks of just that. And she's come out of that camp so much more regulated. So it really is a testimony of what you're saying, that it's not always just about, focusing on the illness or a certain supplement, that sometimes it's just about reminding the child that they have the capacity to heal and that they are designed to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. How can people find you, and how do you recommend, if they want to work with you, they reach out?
So the best place to find me is on my website, healthykidshappykids.com, and also Instagram, which is healthykids_happykids. I unfortunately am no longer accepting new patients, which is why I'm training practitioners to practice in the same way. So you can find practitioners. I have my practitioner membership site, and we hope to have a list soon of the practitioners there.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you for everything you do to support families and kids so that we can heal and kind of get out of this hole that we've been digging and hopefully have more optimal resilience in everyone's life, moving forward. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on Everyday Ancestral. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You can find the show notes, links, and resources mentioned at eatpluck.com. That's EATPLUCK.com. And hey, if you know someone who'd get something out of this, share it with them too. Stay curious, live well, and keep it ancestral.